We have today Dr. Howard Ferran with our Chairside chats here at the Midwestern University Business Club. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Ferran. We really appreciate it. Dr. Ferran.
Please call me Howard. Please call me Howard.
Howard, you have more than 30 years of experience in private practice. You've started Dental Town with over 200,000 dental professionals, wrote Uncomplicate Business. I'm going blank here. You're a Pankey grad. You've done it all. You've got an MBA, started Today's Dental, everything. So we'll just start off the first, 20 minutes here, just talking about you, kind of giving us more of an intro to who you are.
All right. Well, hey, really, it's just an honor that you invited me to come on the show, and I'm totally grateful. And but basically, I'm just the average go-lucky guy born in Wichita, Kansas, in 1962. My mom and dad had 7 kids in like 3 days. My dad was beyond poor. He delivered bread to Rainbow Bread for $11,000 a year, and we were so poor that our family never even knew we were poor. We didn't know we were poor until we started making money and moved out in the suburbs. But when I was 10 in 1972, my dad had saved up the money, and the government after World War II had built all these interstates because the President Eisenhower was really impressed by the way the Germans could make a tank and put it on these autobahns and move it, clear across the country in 6 hours. In America, they were making tanks in Ohio, and it'd take 6 weeks of dirt roads to get it to LA. So they built this interstate. And before the interstate system, almost all the people were born, raised, lived, and died and never went 100 miles away from home. And now all of a sudden they're driving hundreds of miles down the road. And when they got to the next city, they didn't know anything. They didn't recognize anything. And that's when the greatest minds in business, like Ray Kroc, realized that the value of a franchise, to brand something so that everything's not the unknown. And my dad jumped on that, and he saved up money. Imagine this. He's making $11,000 a year. He's got 7 kids, a stay-home mom, and he was able to save up his money and buy a Sonic drive-in franchise. And the first year he made 60 grand, and we couldn't believe it. And by the time, so we moved out into a nicer area. Then by the time he got to like 5 or 6, he moved out to the nicest area in Wichita, Kansas, Hidden Lakes Estates. And my next door neighbor is Kenny Anderson, a dentist. And my little brother wasn't born until I was 17. You'll have to Google Catholic birth control, Russian Vatican roulette to figure that out. But my gosh, I would go. Dad was the love of my life. But when you go there, we made hamburgers and onion rings and tater tots. And then I'd go to work with my next door neighbor, Kenny. And remember, there were no computers and smartphones and video games. And he had the highest tech thing I'd ever seen. It was an X-ray that would go through the tooth, and then you would go step into the dark room with the hottest dental assistant you ever seen in your life, and you're a young kid like, God, I'm in a dark closet with this dental assistant developing an X-ray. It was just love at first sight. I wrote my dental school letter in the 6th grade. How do I become a dentist? My dad was thoroughly against it because he didn't understand it. He's like, okay, so Kansas didn't have a dental school, so I went to Creighton, and they had a dental school. He says, so you're going to study 8 years of college to be a dentist. And we were looking at the deal, and the average dentist at that time made like, $80,000 a year. And he says, in 8 years, you could own 3 or 4 Sonic drive-ins and be a millionaire. And a lot of his friends, they were getting all their kids and nephews and cousins into it. And I said, yeah, Dad, I guess so, but I don't want to be a millionaire making French fries and onion rings. I want to be one of these dentists. So I broke my dad's heart doing that, but I did it with him for 10 years, and without knowing it. So senior year of dental school, here I am sitting in lab with Brad and Brad Gettleman, Howard Ferran, EFG. We were always really close to each other, and usually sitting 1 or 2 seats away from him 4 years. By the way, hardest working man I've ever seen in dentistry. Not only is he freaking smarter than a genius, but I mean, gosh, you got to lab. They tell you do 3 preps on a plastic tooth. He'd do 30. He was always there when I got there, always there. And then here's me, the opposite. I'm sitting there, and we're in this 3-month lab, and we have to make a 3-unit PFM bridge from scratch, wax up, cast. All that. So I called Kenny Anderson on a payphone. We didn't have smartphones and all that. And I said, are we really going to have to do this? Because I've never seen you do that. And he's like, hell no, you're not ever going to do that. That's stupid. I sent it to a lab and I said, well, can I give you my impression and you send it to the lab? And he's like, absolutely. So that 3 months, I realized that I'm about to graduate and my sonic drive-in mode kicked in. So first thing I did is I was in Kansas City in Crown and Bridge Lab with Gettleman, and I wrote the Department of Economic Security, and I said, where is the growth going to be in the next 30 years? Because when I was in Wichita, and decided I wanted to be a dentist in the 7th grade. By the way, my two friends, John Lease and Alan Tebow, we went from the 7th grade to the endodontists school. They're both endodontists now. John's an endodontist out in LA, and Alan's back in Kansas. And my gosh, we were always visiting dental offices after school, on summer breaks. I mean, every time we rode our bicycles around, if there's a dental office, we'd stop in there and harass some poor old dentist. And they were so nice and lovely and all that stuff. But man, they would sit down and tell you that Kansas didn't have a dental school. And every year that no good, rotten Creighton University in Omaha and UMKC in Kansas City sends another dozen dental graduates to a town that doesn't grow in population. Because in Wichita, the population stayed the same because every time a girl got pregnant, a guy left town. And they would show you on Excel, on spreadsheets, how every year their net income was drifting downwards. And it was a big concern. And I knew in Sonic Drive-In, I knew that, you wouldn't put 4 Sonic Drive-Ins on the same corner like you see with dentists. You'll go to find a medical dental building with 8 dentists in the same building. There's a building in San Francisco right downtown on 450 Sutter Street. There's over 100 dentists in one building. In fact, if you stay there long enough, you'll get to see one dive out the window because there's no concept of demographics. And right now, 60% of all the counties in America don't even have one of the 12 specialties recognized by the ADA. So there's anything dentists and physicians don't know, it's demographics and all that kind of stuff. So I want to know this demographics. So they sent me back a report that they thought between 85 and 2000, the United States would create 30 million new jobs, and they would be, half of them would be in 5 markets. It was Silicon Valley and Orange County, Phoenix, Boston, and Tampa. And I didn't want any more cold in Boston. Kansas was enough. I couldn't stand all those insects in Florida. And I'm just being honest. Growing up, going to Catholic school from kindergarten to the end of Creighton, I thought California was just like a bunch of hedonists, Hollywood drug addicts having orgies, and that scared me. And so I looked at Phoenix. And then Phoenix, it was like 55% of the people moving in were from the Midwest, which I thought, well, them are normal people that talk right and everything. I'll just go there. So then I wrote the Arizona Department of Economic Security and asked them for the same report. And I was pretty lucky because out here in the desert, if you don't have water, you have nothing. So they sent me the 6-year, 2.5-foot water pipeline of where that was going to spread, the 6-year street widening, and then they sent me the 1970, 80, and 85 mini census. So I got a 6-foot by 4-foot map. There was no computer. I traced out the 303 census tracts, and I just made a simple calculation. How many people for a dentist? That's all I really wanted to know. And my gosh, it was all between like 1 in 500 all the way to 1 in 6,000. So obviously I picked the 1 in 6,000, which is Ahwatukee. It's the southernmost part of Phoenix, Arizona, where the growth was. And it was, I opened there and, it needed a dentist, and the growth was growing great. There was need. I could supply what they were demanding. And I noticed when I set up that most of the dentists I met, they would actually wake up in the suburbs where there was like 1 dentist for every 2,000, the national average. And then they get in their car and commute for an hour downtown. And by the time they got out of their car, it was at 1 in 500. I'm like, you commute an hour just to ruin your life? And if they would have gotten their car and drove an hour out of the city, there were cities everywhere that don't even have a dentist. And right now, all that research is done for you on Pew. Pew is some foundation, think tank, whatever. And they started off with saving the oceans, and then they moved into healthcare. They have all the research. They can show you where every dentist doesn't exist, where there's need and all that kind of stuff, which by the way, that 2-hour commute out of town it's going to be nothing now that they have driverless cars. I mean, it won't be like you're getting up and driving for an hour and a half or whatever. I imagine we're within just a few years of your alarm clock goes off, you go crawl in the back seat of your driverless car and go back to bed and wake up an hour later and you're someplace that needs you. And so the demographics was smart. And then at that time, remember what seems obvious now wasn't obvious then, is all the dentists were hidden in these medical dental buildings and no one could see them. And I, growing up in Sonic, and friends with Dan Carney, the founder of Pizza Hut, where the average Pizza Hut would buy the land in the building and do about $700,000 and net about 7%. And McDonald's at the time was doing about $1 million, and they had about a 3,500 square foot building. So I just thought, well, I'm going to go buy a commercial pad. I mean, if McDonald's can do $1 million selling hamburgers and fries and mixed sucky salads, I can do it easily. Where the cheapest thing I've got is a periapical x-ray for $20. I mean, one x-ray and exam, you couldn't eat that much food at McDonald's. And so I set that up. And my gosh, I'd say I was the 8th dentist on that corner, but the others were all in medical dental buildings. And of the first 100 patients that came in, probably every one of them said, God, it's about time Ahwatukee got a dentist. I've been having to drive all the way over to Tempe. So there was just no visibility. And to me, it was just simple business. So I knew the business. But when I got out of school, I didn't know how to do dentistry. So, I got my FAGD, that took 5 years, MAGD, my diplomat in the International Congress of Oral Plantology, the Mish Institute, Pankey, all those places, and was learning how to do the dentistry. But the business of dentistry, I mean, my dad taught me that 10 years owning a franchise. And then people started wanting to know why this. And by the way, when I first met Brad, when I was in dental school, they had a meeting at Redbird's, the bar across the street, and I couldn't get in because my ID, I wasn't 21 yet. And so I got in there at 20 because I did undergrad in 3 years. And then in kindergarten, I'll never forget this. My mom takes me to kindergarten, Blessed Sacrament. My 2 older sisters are in there. And that's when she tells her that kindergarten is no longer full day. It's a half day. And my mom just has a complete breakdown, bawling. She's got 3 other kids at home. And she says, Howie's my hyper child. I can't make 2 trips. And they said, don't worry. Then said, don't worry. We'll just move him right to first grade. That's all day. So they moved me to first grade early because my mom didn't want to pick me up after lunch. And so I got out of school. And so then a bunch of people want to know why this 24-year-old dumbass kid has this big old practice, just crushing it. It was because I was getting an A in business and demographics and marketing and advertising and everything that would be no different if you owned a hamburger store or a dental store. And so, that was just easy. And then after years of lecturing on practice management, I realized, well, I'm kind of like a dental assistant teaching dentistry. I don't have any credentials in business. So I went back to ASU and got my MBA degree. And that was really fun. But the one lesson I want to beat into your guys' head the most is financial first. And that is, I graduated from high school in 1980. And that's when interest rates were 20.5%, unemployment and it was double digit, and it was the worst thing I'd ever seen in my life. And then it finally got fixed, and I got out of dental school in 87, and I think the dental school deal was pretty funny because when I got ready to graduate, I already had my demographics. While I was in Kansas City, I called the landlord of the property, and I said, well, I went to Coldwell Banker because they had these big mainframe computers with IBM, and you could talk, you could email back and forth from Kansas City to Phoenix. Coolest thing I ever seen. And he said, yeah, I got a 1,200 square foot bay, 60 feet wide, 60 deep, whatever. And I said, how much? And he said, $15 a square foot for 3 years. And I said, okay, well, I'll sign a lease for $20 a square foot for 5 years. And he said, all right. And he says, what am I doing with this extra money? And I said, well, you built a 20-acre center. I don't have any subs. You can build out my build out. And then it won't cost me any money, and you can probably build out for half of what I can. So he said, fine, and he said he wanted to do that because when they flip the deal, it'll have a higher cash flow rate with a 5-year, $20 lease instead of a 15 3-year. And then I went down to the equipment store, and I picked out all the greatest equipment I wanted, which back then I'll never forget because my student loan debt was $87,000, and that's how much the equipment was. And I thought, wow, man, all my student loans combined for this equipment. And they said, yeah, well, it's $87,000. I said, well, I don't have a dime because my dad would never give me a dime. He paid for my sisters to go to college, but since I was a male, he said, it was going to be different. And he said, you need to be a self-made man. And he said, if I give you money, blah, blah, blah. So I had to be a self-made man. And so I told the health coach, I said, well, I don't have a dime. I want all this equipment. So just give it to me on a 5-year lease to own. So I got a free build out. I got a free equipment, and I opened up my dental office. I graduated May 11, and I was open September 21st. I mean, 4 months, I was open and ready to go. As opposed to these graduates you see now where they get out of school and they always say, oh, I'm just going to get a job. And every year they hate it and they get a different job. And they do this for 5 years of their life until they finally are so freaking miserable. They say, well, I'm either going to shoot myself or open up my own office. And you see that always in highly educated people. I mean, if you want to have 1 million employees that do whatever you say and salute you, you need to go into the military. Walmart has the largest employer, 1.8 million people. Most of them are high school graduates around there. But man, when you get into doctors and dentists and lawyers, ask the faculty in any dental school, hey, what's the politics like among the faculty? And they're just like, oh my God, because they're too smart. You say something to someone with a high school education and you're a doctor, they say, well, you're the doctor, I'll follow you. If you're an 18-year-old infantry, you're like, well, you're the general. I mean, didn't you go to West Point? I'll do what you say. But man, dentists, lawyers, physicians, every one of them knows math, physics, chemistry, biology, and you say anything and they break apart the question and overthink it and look at it from 8 different approaches, and they're like herding cats. And so I already know how it ends when you have a doctor being somebody's little bitch and doing whatever the owner says and without any thoughts to what you're putting into it. Just doesn't work. So I recommend skipping the 5-year job hopping thing and start doing it. It's the same advice for a family. There is no good time to start your own business or start a family. I mean, that's a lot of chaos, unpredictability. You don't know what's going to happen. And if you've always wanted to have, I always wanted to have 4 kids, and or at a minimum 3 or 4 or whatever. And I opened up my practice, and what I'm most proud of is I made my 4 boys in 60 months. By the time I realized this was a really bad idea, I was done. I had my family, I had my office, I was all finished. And to do that while you're young and dumb is the best time, because if you go get a job somewhere and you're making $150,000 a year and you're getting all comfortable, and then you start, well, do you want to blow that up and go take the risk of your own business and throw a kid in there for extra measure of insanity? No, there's some things that are best done when you're young and dumb. And getting married, start a family, and starting your own business is what you do when you have no idea how much energy you have. Like on Sunday, I'll go over and visit Zach and watch him with Evelyn, and I went over to my son Ryan's and watch him with Jasper, and I just like, God, where do they get the energy to do this? Well, hell, I'm 58 years old. I sure as hell wouldn't want to start my own business at 58 years old in the family. I mean, you guys don't even know how much energy you have because you're not old yet. There's that. But the thing is about the inflation. Of all the, I graduated in 80 and the economy was horrible. I graduated in May of 87, and October was Black Monday. Then there was then I had the longest period of peace and growth from 87 to 2000. Then there was the Y2K bubble pop. By the way, that popped in 2000. I'm just trying to get a, how old were you, Landon, in 2000?
In 2000, 6 years old.
Oh my God. Wow, this is kindergarten, nursery school.
6 and 7 years old.
So you guys didn't even see that. So the only thing you would have remembered was the 2008 Lehman Brothers collapse and whatever. Yeah. And that was the lamest recession I've ever lived through in my life. Now, remember, here's the scary thing. You have to be as old as me to ever remember inflation. You're never going to find, I'm at 58, you're never going to find even really a 50-year-old. Anybody 49 or less has no memory of inflation. And what inflation means, I can explain it really simple. And it's so obvious to everyone. I don't know why people don't get it, but imagine the entire planet was just one island. Please tell me you remember Gilligan's Island. Was that a thing?
Yep.
Really? You know Gilligan's Island?
Yeah, late at night.
Oh, right. Well, raise your hand if you know what Gilligan's Island is. Okay, I did not know that one was still alive out there. Imagine Gilligan's Island, but there's just one person on Gilligan. Oh, by the way, we finally got the answer. You know, I was always asked, the number one question in grammar school was, would you pick Ginger or Mary Ann? And remember the two girls? And you know what the right answer was? It was Mary Ann, because she's the only living person still alive from that show. So if you pick the other one, she's dead. And but basically, let's say that you lived on Gilligan's Island, and you're one person, you're Landon, and your total productivity was making one hut, and there was only $1 in circulation, and the government provided that dollar for currency, for exchange of a store of value for trade. Then that hut is $1. Now I still got just Landon. He still only made one hut. But the government printed another dollar. Now there's $2 in circulation. So now the hut is $2. Nothing changed in productivity. Nothing changed in production. It's just monetary policy, and it went to $2. And that's why Milton Friedman won the Nobel Prize in economics from University of Chicago, showing that all this inflation is monetary policy. So remember, you got to get in the zone before the pandemic. Before the pandemic, Lehman's Brothers was 2008. It's 2021. It's been a really long time. The price earnings is really high, and I want to explain what price earnings mean, because young kids don't have anything to anchor to. Price earnings, if I buy a share of a stock for $1 and it's has a dime of a dividend, it'll take 10 years before I get my dollar back. That would be a 10 times price earnings. And price earnings historically has the most value at about 6 to 8. And it's not just currency. Go back to the Irish diaspora. My family tree is 100% Irish. They got here 40 years before Ellis Island. And if you didn't have the money to get here, you could be an indentured servant, where someone would transfer you here, and then you'd have to work for them for 6 to 8 years. Now, you look at Tesla right now, it's got a 1,500 times price earnings, which means if you bought it at the fall of the Roman Empire, you still wouldn't have got your money back. It's complete insanity. And like the normal is like 30 years. So let's just take the normal average 30 years. Okay, well, imagine you graduate from dental school, and I say, Landon, you come work at Today's Dental, free of charge. Just be my little bitch for 6 years, and I'll give you the keys to the office. Whole thing's yours. There's a lot out of the whole graduating class of 2021. Somebody would take that deal and say, hell yeah, I'll work for free. I'll keep my costs down. I'll get a part-time job. I'll live with my girlfriend. I'll do that. But what if I said 30 years? Will you work for me from age 25 to 55 for free? Just to get an office? Yeah, no one would. Well, what if I said 1,500 years for Tesla? I mean, it's completely lost all grounding in metrics, and I've seen this happen in 80, 87, 2000, 2008, and it was happening right before the pandemic. And Warren Buffett, remember, I went to Creighton, that's Omaha, Nebraska, where Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger started Berkshire Hathaway. And when I took my first business class at Creighton, Warren came over. I never met Charlie, but Warren came over and talked to the class and everything. And I'll never forget him talking about the Buffett Index. And the Buffett Index was, within a country, their GDP, will take the whole value of all the Wilshire 5,000 publicly traded companies. Well, it obviously has to be less than the GDP, because only 15% of Americans even work for a publicly traded company. 85% do not. And its growth rate Well, when it gets above, when Warren likes the total value of public companies to be about 70% of the total GDP, and then every once in a while it'll get up to 100, and it'll get up to 105 and 110. And Warren was telling everybody every time that it's overpriced, and it will come back down, and it always does, and it always will. And a lot of people say, well, maybe it'll just go up forever. Okay, well, if the stock keeps increasing in value, well, what happens when the stocks are worth more than the GDP? I mean, and then does it double again? I mean, when something is mathematically impossible, it usually doesn't work. And so there is a thing called gravity, and gravity is interest rates. So that was that. And then the pandemic came out, and it started to pop the bubble, and the stock market went down. And what was the government response? Counterfeiting, printing money, and the first round was like $1 trillion. And then the stock market came back up, and then the government, and by the way, if you study 5,000 years of recorded history, where the government on average kills 6 out of 100 of its people, whereas the people only kill 1 out of 100 of its people, the difference between us killing 1 out of 100 of our own family versus them killing 6 out of 100, it does not equal right. And so these guys are historically, they've never been the solution to a problem. They're always the cause of the problem. And a lot of people don't see that. Like take dentistry. I practice across the street from the Guadalupe Indian Reservation. Our neighbor to the south, I don't know if you've ever heard of it before, but it's called Mexico, that has 100 million people. And all the government's always whining like, oh, poor Guadalupe, 20,000 people and they don't have a dentist and they're poor. How are we going to fix their dental health needs? Think of the sickness of that thought when the reason there's no dentist there is because every time a Mexican dentist comes up from Mexico and sets up shop there, someone calls the police and they send out a police officer to arrest you and kidnap you and put you in a cage and lock you up, all the things your mom told you not to do, and then deport you and then complain that there's no health care. We never had a health care crisis until up until 1900. There's not anything in the literature, no stories or newspapers about no access to care. Because if you're a doctor and you're born in India and you march with your feet and say, you know what, I want to be a doctor in New York City. Well, come on down. And then in 1900, there was a government takeover where they sit there and set up 50 state boards of dental examiners, and they closed down all the schools and doctors and said, if your school wants to go open back up, you got to get accredited. We got to license you, and if you're not accredited, you're not licensed, we will arrest you and put you in a cage. And there starts at 1900, healthcare is 1% of GDP. By 2000, it's 14%. Now it's 2021, and it's 17%. And what's the government saying? Well, now we need universal health coverage because it's so expensive and unaffordable that we have to save you. That's like the government coming up to you with a baseball bat, breaking your kneecaps, and then saying, let me help you buy a wheelchair. Well, you're not helping me buy a wheelchair. You caused the wheelchair. That's what they always do. And then so to help you in this pandemic, they counterfeit $1 trillion, where if Landon got caught printing just one $20 bill and tried to pass it at 7-Eleven, you go to jail for 10 years. But when they do it with $1 trillion, and so what happened after they printed that $1 trillion? Well, you're in a pandemic. And my gosh, dental offices were closed for 2 months. Construction sites shut down. People stopped traveling and moving around the country. So it was the lowest immigration growth we've ever had on record. And what happened to real estate? Oh, it went up 30%. Oh, oil went from 20 to 60. Lumber went up 274%. And I'm just starting to hear moms notice that things at the grocery store are getting more expensive. I'm like, well, why do you think a Snickers bar would raise their price in the middle of the pandemic? It's not value. And the biggest proof is Iran. Iran, there's international sanctions. The people can't trade. They can't do anything. But the inflation is gripping, and they don't want to hold the Tehran currency. So they're all dumping it into the Tehran stock market. And that's why the Tehran stock market is the #1 performing stock market this year, just like your is going big and all this stuff. And it's just inflation. That's all it is inflation. And the only way you can stop inflation is to raise the interest rates. And see, the interest rates have been almost zero because when you're the Federal Reserve and you're in collusion with the government, you're keeping interest rates down because you got 23 trillion in debt. But if you get inflation and you start to lose your international currency reserve, they'll have to raise interest rates. And if they normalized it to 5%, half the budget would go to interest only. So the point I'm trying to make on this is that when you guys come out of school $400,000 in debt and they tell you, Landon, you're a doctor. You're like, finally I get a Beamer and a big house and I get to start eating out sushi 3 nights a week. Dude, if you were homeless living behind a trash can, he has more money than you. You're 400,000 under. The homeless guy is at zero neutral net. If you throw him a coin, he's that coin above zero than you. You have to live like a pauper. You have to live like poverty. You use other people's money, and the price of other people's money is going to go high. Now, it's not, what I'm telling you is not doom and gloom. Hell, I lived through 80, 87, 2000, 2008. But if you know that a hurricane's coming, you prepare for it. And what you do is cash is king. I mean, if you have one job, get a part-time job. I see dental graduates coming out with this bizarre attitude. Well, they'll say, I can't find a job because this one job, they wanted me to do hygiene. Well, I'm not going to lower myself for hygiene. And they wanted me to do evenings and Saturdays. Dude, you should be so lucky to have a job and get experience and do hygiene and work evenings and Saturdays. And if you can move back in with your parents or in a low cost, then you can start saving up money and paying off this debt. Now, this debt that you have from student loans, I know these 2 schools in our backyard are private schools, so they're expensive. Average student loan indebtedness is about, for 2017 was 287. But remember, 287, the average cost of a kid from birth to 17, not including college, is 233. So I had 4 kids. If you have $400,000 student loans, instead of having 4 kids, have 2. I mean, a kid is $200,000, but you never hear dental students talking about, well, I'm $400,000 student loans. I said, well, I hope you immediately gave yourself a vasectomy. And they say, no, I'm actually going to make 2 more kids. Okay, what do you bitch about student loans when you're going to do it again? And I'll tell you another thing. This is bizarre. My student loan debt was $87,000, but my divorce was $3.8 million. So if you take, that means my divorce was 41 times more expensive than my student loans. So you got to look at divorce. Guess who has the lowest divorce rate? When you have a professional, when you and your spouse both have a professional degree, you're both accountants, lawyers, dentists, it's a 10% divorce rate. I mean, and you want to marry somebody who stays home and destroys $10,000 a month from age 25 to 65, which is $5 million? Or would you like to marry one of your classmates in dental school who's going to be a dentist who makes $10,000 a month from age 25 to 65? That's $5 million in gains. That's a $10 million different spread. The single greatest move you can do in dental school is not leave until you marry someone in your class, and that's an order. I mean, you're not going to get a divorce, you'll have something to talk about, all that kind of stuff. So also the other thing you have to think about, and by the way, you can stop me anytime, go to question and answer, I'm loose the goose.
Okay, yeah.
I'm just ranting. When you look at income, the average net income for a dental specialist is $320. Average net for a general dentist is $197. So the average dentist who owns their own practice makes $244 net, and the dentists who are employees are $147. So if you're wondering, well, if I got a dental office and I had an associate, I wonder how much I can make off that. Well, you know the macroeconomic answer is about $100,000 a head. So if you're expecting to make $1 million or a dime, you're not paying attention to your macro. And so when you look at that, in the year 1900, there were no specialties. By 2000, the physicians had 58 and we had 8. Now it's just 2020 and the dentists are up to 12. And that specialization is what Adam Smith talked about in 1776 in Wealth of Nations, where he said nobody can figure out how to make milk, cheese, butter, and wool, and pick one thing and your productivity will goes up. I cannot tell you how much I recommend that you specialize. And blood and guts, oral surgeons make the most at 448, periodontist 330, endo 307, pediatric dentist 304, ortho 289, prosthodontist, specialty, oral surgery, endo, perio, pediatric, ortho, pros, dental anesthesia, oral facial pain, oral med, oral path, oral radiology, dental public health. There's always massive room at the top who understands it the most. And furthermore, they never get sued because they'll sue me for a failed root canal when they bring in someone like Brad, who only does root canals forever, is going to be better. Dental anesthesiology. Every time a general dentist does an IV and they die, it's game over because they're not as qualified as a dental anesthesiology. So I would say that my advice to you is live massively below your means, and you got to get really good at one thing. And you get really good at one thing as a general dentist, but you got to get good at something. You got to hang your hat on something. And usually to master one thing is going to take you 10,000 hours, which the average person do in 10 years. But if you're a working maniac, you could do it in 5. But you're going to have to get out of school and you're going to have to get good at something. And what the first thing I would do to get good at is I would get good at demographics. And do you have many Mormons in your class?
I believe we have a lot.
They're the only ones that take my advice on this, because if you're a Mormon, you don't have to go live in Scottsdale to have an evening bar and all that kind of stuff like that. They got the whole family thing in one house. They'll go. I've shown several, an entire county that didn't have a dentist. And hell, they're Mormons, they're family, they stay home at night, it's all about the kids. And they'll go there and they don't have to take all these insurances. And they have their own fee schedule. Then that small town, I'll say, well, go to that small town, it doesn't have a dentist. Go find the mayor, walk down to First Street in Maine. You'll find 3 or 4 boarded up buildings that have been boarded up for decades. Tell them to give you a free damn building, and you're $400,000 in debt. It's hard to get a loan. And then walk him to the bank and say, give me a signature loan. I moved my family here. Mayor's giving me a free building. So you get into a dental office, a free building. The bank gives them a signature loan. They don't have to lower their fees to match Medicaid, Medicare, and PPOs and Delta and Blue Cross and Blue Shield, because they're the only game in town. And usually the first year they'll collect $1 million and take home $400,000. And basically all of those cities are about 2 hours away from wherever a Southwest Airlines takes off. But again, like right now, you get on Pew. There's all these cities in Arizona that don't even have one dentist. And you're like, well, I don't want to commute 2 hours to work. Well, what if it was a driverless car? And what if the driverless car took you there? And then what if you stayed over? I have dentist friends who did that, and they just put a bedroom next to Doc's office, and he would drive up there and then work all day, spend the night there, work the next day, then drive home. And in that 2 days, he would make more than doing low fee, low price dental insurance where PPO set all your fees and your overhead's real high in the big city. And it just goes on and on and on. It's just, that is the foundational advice. And by the way, and another thing I would do is this. I got an MBA. It's 2 years at ASU. That was the first time I bought a laptop. It was in 1998. And I went in there and I said, I'm only taking this for dentistry in my dental office. I don't care about Silicon Valley and computer chips. And I took notes for 2 years. It was 2 classes, a trimester, 3 trimesters a year, 2 years. And I put all of that into my 30-day dental MBA. And it's on iTunes and audio. It's on YouTube. It's on Dentaltown. And I look at that and how it's been like 20 years later. And people say, do people still listen to that 20 years later? Well, what's changed in geometry and trig and a cosine and a tangent in 20 years? This is business, basic business. And I still get so many kudos. And I really recommend your study group club to plow through the 30-day dental MBA, which probably is going to look the same, just like when you look at geometry. The only weird thing about geometry, I used to think, damn, Pythagoras was doing this in the sand 2,500 years ago, and nothing's changed. No one said, oh, yeah, that Pythagoras guy, what an idiot. It's just solid. People are people, and if you know if you have a plan, you're going to find the demographics, you're going to live below your means, you're going to get really good at something, and you're not going to waste 5 years job hopping for a DSO so they can make $147,000 a year off you and get rich. And by the way, I'll just end on the DSOs. Is the DSOs are it's a joke, and you can prove it because none of them are publicly traded. Why? Because when I got out of school in '87. They started to get publicly traded. First was Orthodontic Centers of America. There was about a dozen on NASDAQ. And they all lost money and they all imploded and they're all gone. And no one talked about them for a decade. And now they're back. But you notice none of them are publicly traded. Snapchat is publicly traded. And that was to send a dick picture to someone that as soon as they looked at it, it disappeared. So a dick pic device goes public, but not a dental office. And why? It's very easy. Imagine Shark Tank. You go to Shark Tank, and who's the smartest guy on Shark Tank?
Mark Cuban.
Nah, it's always the bald guy, Mr. Wonderful. I'm telling you, the
Kevin.
bald guy's always the smartest one in the room. Imagine going to
He's a
Mr.
jerk,
Wonderful. He is, and but imagine you say to him, "What do you want?" And he says, "Yeah, I want $1 million." Well, what are you gonna do with it? I'm gonna buy a dental office, just like a DSO. How do I get my money back? Your money back? Well, I'm just gonna come back next week and ask for another $1 million. And I'm going to come back every week because after 100 weeks, I'll show you I built a company that's now doing $100 million. And then he'll say, yeah, but look at your balance sheet. You got $100 million of debt and you have they're just buying their earnings. And that's not how companies that go public work. Basically, you go public, you make so much profit, you retain the earnings in your company, and you build it on profit. There's only 2 publicly traded dental offices and chains in the world, and they're both in Australia. One's 1-300 Dentists, one's Pacific Smiles. There's one in Singapore on their exchange, Q&M. But there's none in America. And during a contraction, and they're not access to easy money, you will see a lot of them contract a lot along with it because they have extremely highly leveraged debt sheets. And I'm telling you, debt is the monster called gravity that will bring you back down to ground. And I just want you to, I think it's a great profession. I would do it again. I would graduate again today in your same shoes. I would just get really good at something. And like I did the first time, I would go to an area I was needed, not an area that I wanted to go. And my gosh, if you stay mean and lean and you're going to work hard and you're going to live below your means, you're going to pay off your student loans. And if you work like no man has for a decade, you're going to live and reap the rewards of that for several decades. So that's where you're at. You're not going to graduate and become a rich doctor. You're going to graduate and you're going to be the poorest dentist in town. You'll be the only dentist who has no job and $400,000 of debt. So no Beamers, no sushi, no fancy vacations, and and one job. Are you kidding me? I mean, if you get a job someplace 4 days a week, go find another job for Friday and Saturday. And every time you have that job, you're going to get more experience. You'll see more dentists. You'll get better, faster while you're paying down your debts. And before you know it, you'll finally be a high-producing, really good doctor who got good at one thing. And then you'll live like doctors do when they live in the richest country in the world.
So question for you. So when you worked when you went to ASU for your MBA and you decided to create the 30-day MBA, what propelled you to do that? Why reach out to dentists and kind of provide that content?
Because, when I graduated from dental school, my mom cried and I was the first, dentist in the family or doctor in the family, all that kind of stuff. I mean, dentistry started 200 years ago with Pierre Fauchard. And by the way, Pierre Fauchard was a barber surgeon who convinced all the guys to give up the barber shit and let's just do dentistry and let's become a specialty of medicine. When an orthodontist tells you he's a specialty, he's just showing his lack of any historical knowledge. Orthodontics is a subspecialty of dentistry, which is a specialty of medicine, and it's a 200-year journey, and we're all just little bitty people standing on the shoulders of all the people that went behind us, before us. Sapiens been around 200,000 years, about 108 billion humans have lived and died, and our presence is from their journey, and we owe it all to the 108 billion that went before us, and now that my 4 boys are now all out of the home. Now they all own their own home, and they've made me 6 dependents. I know that as soon as one of them gets old enough to make a baby, I'll be dead. That's how it works. And I want, when my little Taylor Marie or Evelyn goes to the dentist, I want dentists like you to keep it going. And it's not a zero sum. And so many people think that like if an immigrant come here, they'll take away a job. I mean, insane. I mean, look at North America. It was 500 years of immigration that made us the greatest country in the world. And these people have no sense of history. Like you'll hear of someone, dentist crying because he's in a town and the main factory closed down. And you're well aware of his political views from social media. And I'll say, hey, dumbass, who started that factory? Oh, because, you know, a 3-second Google search shows that some guy from Armenia immigrated all the way to some backward-ass town in Ohio, built that city. Now, I'm asking you, could that Armenian immigrate here today? No, because the people are so dumb, they shut up the wall because most people all live in the country they're born. It's a special person that motivates and moves halfway to another continent because they got an idea. They're more ambitious. They're more energetic. They got a better idea. And your response is building a wall? Why isn't the response just shoot yourself in the foot and then castrate your left nut? I mean, that's the only thing that built this country was 500 years of emigration. And then when they get out, they're like, well, it's good for me, but I still want the state board to keep all the foreigners out because you don't want to compete. See, you don't want somebody from Mexico, but I go down to Yuma and you cross Yuma into Mexico and they have Molar City and all those dentists have tried to practice in the United States. And who are their clients? Americans driving down there 3 hours to get dentistry cheaper. Well, wouldn't it be better for the poor not to have to drive to Yuma and cross into Mexico if the Mexican dentists will come here? Well, that's every economy in America. You always had a nice flow of 1 million people a year building the greatest economy in the world. And now you shut off immigration, you want to build a wall, and you're, instead of going out like World War II, when you had to do all this money, World War II, they went out and taxed all the people, and they bought $1 trillion worth of war bonds to build the machine to stop Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany, but that's not how they do it anymore. Now they're like, well, we don't want to inconvenience you by taxing you, so we're just going to print it. Now think about that. You're sleeping in bed and you have $1 to your name and you hide it under your mattress. And that's the only dollar in the world. And the government prints another dollar. Now your dollar's worth 50 cents. See, they can tax you without income tax by printing money. And this is going to end very badly like it has every other time in the history of the United States. So you got to be prepared. And that's what I call the human condition. I mean, humans always say they're made in God's image and they're godly and they're so smart and all that, but they're a primate who lost its tail. There's 8 billion of them stuck on the surface of the earth. They can't get off. Everyone on this planet is stuck. They can't get off. They're all going to die. It's a wild situation to be flying around the sun 60,000 miles an hour, trapped on a rock. But these sapiens, they do a lot of stupid stuff. And like this virus, like the coronavirus, I loved it. I mean, my God, it only killed 3 million people. In 1945, when sapiens decided to kill each other, they killed 70 million people. I'd rather be attacked by a virus or a tornado or a hurricane than when humans start killing each other. My God, they're so good at killing each other. Those are the external shocks that'll just really set you back a generation. In fact, World War II was over in 1945. And when I graduated from high school in 1980, that's when the whole world was celebrating that Germany and Japan were now, the Reconstruction was over and they were back online. It took from 45 to 80. So it had been 2 generations of kids like you who, when you got out, all you had to do was clean up all the rubble and take it off to the dump and start all over again for 2 generations just to get back to zero. So I'll fight a virus any day. I just don't like it when my homies start killing each other. And like I say, it's very simple advice. You're going to be a doctor. Go where they demand you. know your demographics, live below your means, work for yourself. You didn't go to school 8 years to make some DSO rich whose books are so shitty they can't even do an IPO like Snapchat. I mean, look at, there's 5,000 publicly traded companies and not one in dentistry can do it. What are you saying? There's no need for dentistry? Then why is there 56 schools? Why does 6 out of 10 Americans see a dentist every year? I mean, obviously there's no need for it. Well, they're not going to go public because they're financial disasters, highly leveraged debt companies, and then get good at something. And, I'd apply to every specialty school. And here's what I love about specialists. Some kids, you give them one constraint and they just throw in the towel and give up. And that's not the type of person that immigrates here from another continent. And I've seen specialists kids not get into specialty school, but they're so hungry and they're so smart. What do? They go down to the Caribbean. They go down to Dominican Republic. It's got like 11 dental schools. They go specialize in Grand Cayman. And then when they come back here, the dental board, they don't care where you got your degree in pediatric dentistry or oral surgery or whatever. As soon as you got your government rubber stamp, you're an oral surgeon. But you got to get good at something. So get good at something, specialize. I don't care. There's a lot worse things that can happen to you than go to Dominican Republic and watch those little Dominican Republican girls on the beach all day. There's worse things that could happen to you.
And I think, going back to diversity and having hardworking people, that's why I've liked, going to Midwestern. There are so many people out there in our class and in the other classes and the guys on here that really bust their butt, which is awesome. It kind of follows that Dr. Gettleman mentality and what you said too, where you come out of college, you come out of undergrad, and then you come out of dental school, and you're hitting the floor running, and you're saving and you're budgeting and you're doing everything you can to pay off that debt. So,
the biggest honor for me as a dentist, I've always been amazed that I'm a part of this club. Like, I would never join a country club because I wouldn't join a country club that would take me as a member. And when I meet these young kids like you, and I mean, I've done mission trips to Mexico and Africa and things like that, and I look at the people that are attracted to go into dentistry, and I'm just in awe and humbled that I'm part of this tribe. I mean, it's an amazing tribe. They go to school 8 years to work with their hands to get you out of pain. I mean, compare that to some Harvard MBA who wants to go to Wall Street and do one financial transaction and walk away with $1 billion that everyone else has to pay. So, it's an honor to be in this club.
I agree. And I know a lot of these guys have some burning questions for you. So we'll open it up for these guys, and, feel free to hit them running.
All right, Landon, thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah.
Anybody got a question?
Yeah, I have a question.
Hey, Howard. Oh, go ahead, Karen.
Oh, sorry
Go for
about that. So if we're not going to take half your advice and we're not going to specialize and not going to live in the middle of nowhere, then what is the revised advice for that?
Okay, well, number one, marry smart. Now, there's first of all, there's no reason to get married unless you're going to make a baby. I mean, why? Where does a legal contract? I'm like, say we were friends and really good friends, and I said, hey, if you want to keep being my friend, you got to sign this contract, and if you stop being my friend, I get your car. You would say, screw you, Howard. Yeah, I'm not doing that, but you do it with women all day long. You do it, no prenuptial. So picking your spouse, again, you have some of the highest, smartest, best humans in your class. Marry someone, but men don't do that. You know why? Because we're a dimorphic species. The males are 25% bigger than the females, and you want to beat your chest, and you want to be King Kong and be the savior of this poor, helpless girl that couldn't afford to buy a banana if it wasn't for you being her hero. And that's just a weird concept, and where the concept should be like, I would like to marry an equal. I'd like to marry a woman, but I'm a doctor of dentistry. I'd like her to be a doctor of dentistry. I went to college for 8 years. I'd like her, marry an equal. And then you have two people footing the bill, and you have lots to talk about. You have lots in common. And then there's living below your means. I mean, when my 4 boys left home, I lived in a McMansion that had 4 one-ton air conditioners for years, and my mind was like, well, if any of the boys come over, their own original bedroom's still there. I mean, it was just an environmental insanity. So, you know, you don't need all this stuff. Like I bought now, and here's another psychological thing. My Lexus, I bought in 2004. It's paid for. It's got like 180,000 miles. Every time I take it to go get an oil change, Lexus dealer's like, well, if you give me your car, I'll give you the brand new Lexus 2020, and all I need is a check for $100,000. It's like, well, why would I want to spend $100,000 to upgrade my car that's perfectly fine? So I just see people spending money just at insane rates. So marry smart, live below your means, and if you can save 5 to 10% of every dollar you ever make. I mean, think about it. I mean, it's just, say you live off $1 a year, and every year you save a nickel, and you know, every dollar you save will make you a nickel a year for eternity. So if you live off $1 a year, that's only 20 nickels. So as soon as you have a machine that makes you 20 nickels a year, you're retired. But you never see that because you live off $1 a year, then the next year now you're living off 2, and then you're living off 3, then you're living off 4. And you do that because by consumer finance, like, I'll give you the car today and you can pay it off slowly in 5 years. I'll give you a house today, slowly in 30 years. But if you had to pay for that car today in cash, like I have $1 million in my checking account. I could go buy, I don't even know what a Lamborghini, but I could go buy $1 million worth of Mitsubishis or Lamborghinis up there. I mean, you would never take your own $200,000 and go buy a Lamborghini. But if someone said, hey, I'll give you a Lamborghini right now, and you just got to give me $1 a day for 1,000,000 years, you do it. So there's very different psychology in paying for something you worked and earned in cash versus borrowing it on these easy financial terms that you don't understand, that by the time you pay off the car, you bought 3 cars. By the time you pay off the 30-year mortgage on your house that you thought was $100,000, you've now paid $300,000. And the bottom line between rich and poor is the poor are always paying 10 cents a dime every year for the access to borrow other people's money. Whereas the rich already have the money and they're loaning it to you for 10 cents a year. So the bottom line is you got to cross the chasm of using other people's money, paying them interest, to loaning other people money and you earning the interest. And the best time to cross that is when you're a baby. You can't wait till you're $1 million in debt and you're 50 years old to start living below your means and saving and crossing the chasm. So, you know, the best habits are started at birth. Everybody that got a gold medal in the Olympics was in that sport by age 5. And the best time to transfer yourself from debtor's prison of using other people's money for interest to now savings, earning that interest, the best time to do it is when you're a baby straight out of school.
Thanks, Howard. Hey, have you met people who have actually gone to the Caribbean, specialized in something, and then come back to the U.S. to work in a specialty?
Absolutely.
But how does the government allow that if they don't allow dentists who are from other countries to come in America?
Well, they had citizenship. They were an American. And these schools, they get accredited. You know, it's a game. There's 1 million attorneys in America, and there's 1 million MDs. And the smartest thing the lawyers did is they took over the government. Almost every government leader, congressman, Senate, Supreme Court, they're all lawyers. If the MDs would have taken it over, it'd be a totally different country. So the lawyers, everything's game theory and it's all about money. And if they get accredited, the accreditation process, I'm sure, is $100,000. I'm sure a law firm does it. And they just keep writing laws and rules and regulations. It's just game theory. It's not right or wrong. And it's not, does it work best or wrong? It's just, that's the way it is. It's a game. And you go to an accredited school and you're a U.S. citizen. And the best person to ask that is you're in Arizona. Go talk to the Arizona State Board of Dental Examiner. I'll tell you a game we did with the Arizona State Board. There was a homeless shelter for veterans, and a dentist there who's worked there 30 years wanted to teach hands-on courses there, because if he had a person like Brad coming in teaching you how to do molar root canals, the veterans would get a bunch of root canals. Or if you were coming in learning how to place implants, it would benefit the veterans, but it was against the law. So I just said, well, this is real easy. We'll just go down the Arizona State Board of Dental Examiners and say, this is a homeless shelter for vets. So I need you to explain to the media why a volunteer dentist from another state can't come to Arizona and treat a vet for free. And she's like, well, I ain't saying that. And then they give you the form and you fill it out. And then, of course, they make money on it. The dentist has to give them like $200 for a temporary license or something like that. But it's just game theory. It's all it is a bunch of game theory. And I'd rather have everybody suing each other than before lawyers when everybody was shooting each other. All business feuds were ended with, even our guy, we even had the founder of the Federal Reserve, Alexander Hamilton, on the $10 bill. I mean, he died in a duel with Raymond Burr. I don't like the duel system. Every time you and I have an argument, we take 10 steps, turn around, and try to blow each other's head off. I don't like that theory. So the suing is much better. Just like the NFL is all whining about these head concussions. Did they forget that in the Roman times you were eaten by a lion? I'll take a slow-growing concussion any day over getting eaten by Mufasa. But it is a game, and that's another thing with Dental Town. There's 275,000 dentists on there, and my gosh, if you want to specialize in something and you can't get in here, if you you got to get good at something, and the money, I mean, God, oral surgeon 448, perio 330, endo 307, whereas the average general dentist who's an employee is 100,000 less than that. So it's big money to go specialize, and it's big money to own. If you own your own practice, you're making $244. That's $250,000 a year. In 4 years, you should have $1 million. But most of those dentists in 4 years don't even have $100,000 saved up. How do you go from being a dental school pauper to making $250,000 for 4 years? You made $1 million in the same time you went to dental school, and you didn't save any of it? That's a behavior. That's a habit. That's the book, The Last Road to Babylon, where, you worked hard, so you should pay yourself. And every time you make $1, you should put a nickel or a dime in the savings account. And when that gets big enough making interest, as soon as that's making the same amount of money as you're currently making, now you're retired. Now you don't have to work. And by the way, work looks very different when you have to go there every day to pay all your minimum monthly bills. But I'll tell you what, when I finally was at a point where I never had to work another day in my life, and then I retired, and that lasted for about 6 weeks, and I was bored out of my mind. And now I don't consider myself, I don't do anything I don't want to do because I don't have to do it. And that just gives you a much better attitude. So now it looks like I work a lot, but I obviously like what I'm doing, or I wouldn't do it because I don't have to do it.
Howard, I'm super curious. What does your day-to-day look like now? Are you still practicing at all, or are you just mostly doing the podcast and Dental Town and your magazine?
Well, it's a fluid situation. I mean, we had a pandemic this year. Like one of my associates took his daughter rollerblading and fell down and broke his shoulder. So I mean, I was in there full time for 2 months just for that injury, and then I was there full time for another injury. It just really depends on what I'm in the mood for. Like I did a podcast 4 years ago because it was a new thing and I thought it'd be fun. I had no idea that 4 years later I'd done 1,600 of them. And I don't even know what the next technology is. And in fact, that's the best answer I should explain to you really quick is that when you look at the stock market from 1850 to today, it only followed new breakthroughs. The Industrial Revolution started in the UK with a steam engine, but it was so big it could only pump flooded water out of coal mines. But, when you play the full hand, everything is faster, easier, higher quality, lower cost, and smaller. Well, as that steam engine got smaller, then it got put into ships and started shipping. When it got to America, they started the canals. There was the telegraph, which turned into the telephone, which turned into the internet. And being able to spot the 10x forces, like I started Dental Town in 99, Facebook started in 2004. I beat Facebook by 5 years. So always on the lookout for the next big thing in technology because And right now, 1/3 of the jobs are in an industry that didn't even exist 2 decades ago. So 1 in every 3 Americans is working on something. So when you see that the horse and buggy is turning into the car, and you see that the telephone is turning into the internet, and to be able to classically train your mind, I guarantee, I mean, think of this. When I walked out of dental school, I'd never seen a computer. I thought the greatest technological advancement of that time was the automatic garage door opener. And then the next after that was the remote television changer. I never saw my smartphone coming. I never saw the computer, the internet. Even Bill Gates, he was a billionaire that owned Microsoft, and he was the last person to recognize the internet, and that was the Netflix web browser and all that kind of stuff. So to train yourself to keep aware of what's new, because these little crazy ideas, like when I started Dental Town, every dentist I know, they laugh. They said, "That's ridiculous. Why wouldn't you just call them? Why don't I just call you on the phone? I mean, why do we need this damn internet thing?" They didn't see it. And so having a massive lookout, always looking out for the next best thing, because it's getting faster and faster and faster and faster. And I assume you're what, 25? When I'm 59, let's say I was 55, let's say you're 29, 59, 30 years from now, oh my God, half of your daily needs haven't even been invented yet. So it moves really, really fast. And when you see something, the people who sell off their horse and buggy and dive right into the automobile, that's where all the big gains are made. And it's the same thing in dentistry, everything. Just and humans are slow. I mean, they're not that smart. They're primates stuck on a rock. They had silent movies and a phonograph for 40 years before someone thought, let's put that sound in the silent movie. And then if you want to know how long it took them to add chocolate to peanut butter, it was even longer. So they stare at the status quo for very long times. In fact, when the Roman Empire fell at 500 to the Renaissance began at 1500, 1,000 years of zero growth. They went sideways for a millennium. And they're fine with it, man. They're humans. They'll chill under a tree and no big deal. They're just humans, and they live a long time. But for you to think slow and act fast and sit there and say, "Wow, I really think this is onto something," and then really focusing on it. And then when you finally realize for your own self, like, would this benefit you? Like Dental Town, to me, it's like I wanted to be able, I didn't know about this case. I want to be able to take a picture, an x-ray, and put it on the line and share that with people like Brad to say, "What do you think?" And then they say, "Well, I think you missed a canal, or it's too short." It worked for me, and I really wanted it, and I thought it'd be awesome. So I put everything I had in and did it. And other people, they just wait, they just look at it, they just stare. But you are going to be shown at least 10 of the next biggest ideas in the world before Wall Street sees it, before any consumer's buying it, and you can just stand there like a monkey under a tree and just stare at it for 40 years, or you can dive on it and say, that's hot. So be on the lookout to classically train your mind of what is the next best thing. And the best place to do that in dentistry is the clone meeting. America's got 50 states. They have to have 50 state meetings. They got to have them every year like the Super Bowl. Europe's much smarter. They have one meeting every 2 years, because the product cycle, by the time I get an idea and I build a prototype and I get funding and I build it, it's about 2 years. So Cologne, Germany, every other year has the IDS meeting, the International Dental Forum, and probably 100,000 dentists come from every corner of the globe. And you'll see like some guy from Korea who's made this and he's selling it in Korea. And then some American will say, "Well, I'll buy the U.S. distribution rights for it for $1. And as long as I sell $100,000 a year, I get to keep this lease. I mean, I know like 20 multimillionaires that's how they made it. They went to Cologne. They saw what was Peter the Great. Ask any Russian, who's the greatest Russian that ever lived? They say it's Peter the Great. What did he do? When he became the king, he took all the country's gold, took all the people's blacksmiths and carpenters, and they went and took a 5-year tour of Russia, and they picked up all of Europe and picked up all these ideas from Italy and France, and he came back to Russia, and he showed them all this new stuff, and that was when Russia took off and became a thing. You could go to the clone meeting. You could commit to going to the clone meeting every other year and looking for that next best thing in dentistry, and you'll never know. Maybe they figured out in Brazil or India or China or whatever, but you can't just, there's 2 million dentists around the world serving 8 billion people. You just don't have enough time and money in the day to invent something in Kuwait and then instantly have it being sold all around the world. So keep your eyes out in dentistry at Cologne, and keep your eyes out for any new technology that you like. And that's where you put your dollars. That's where you put your investment. And again, you're going to see 10 huge things explode in your lifetime, guaranteed, maybe even in the next decade. And whenever there's a downturn, like a war breaks out, World War II is only 4 years. Every recession I've lived through has been about 18 months. So, you don't live 10 years in fear because of some 18 months that's not going to kill you. You know what I mean? You always stay optimistic. It's always 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The 1 step back is a virus, a war, a recession, politics, whatever. But humanity's been on a tremendous march forward. I mean, there's more people that have a smartphone today than the total lives in 1800. I mean, 1800 only had 1 billion people. There's 1 billion people with a smartphone. I mean, sapient. When people say they're worried about humans and they're worried about global warming. Really, you're worried about global warming, dumbass, when we lived through 2 ice ages in 200,000 years without an iPhone? Yeah, we're as tenacious as termites and ants and spiders and cockroaches. We're not going anywhere. And this thing, I mean, my God, if anything, humans are too successful. I mean, they're unstoppable. So you're an optimist just because it's reality.
Hey, Howard. What's your take on the demographics of Phoenix / Tucson, all of Arizona? And if you were to open up a practice today, where would you go about doing that?
Well, it's a great question, and the dentists all go to where the rich are. So you go up to North Scottsdale, and you get rich areas. People live in a bigger area. Like by the time you're in the richest parts of Paradise Valley, the average house is almost a half acre. When you go to the poorest area, a half acre might have a 26 duplex with 100 people in there. So dentists always overweight to where the rich are, and the rich are rich because they don't part with their money. And so Aspen is one of the most successful DSOs out there because they have a focus. They go where the dentists ain't. They go to where the poor are that are taking Medicaid and Medicare. They have a denture clinic in there, so you come in with a denture reline. But the problem with dentists treating the poor is they don't understand market differentiation. Like they'll go to, I'll show you poor areas all over Phoenix that need a dentist desperately. But if any dumbass dentist goes there, he's going to get paid for a Ford Escort for $10,000, but he's going to make a $20,000 Ford Taurus. Like I'll say, okay, well, an amalgam's $1 a spill, and it lasts 38 years. I mean, these fillings last from recurrent decay. Half the amalgam's mercury. You don't find that in the multivitamins. The other half is silver diamine fluoride, tin from stannous fluoride. I mean, the whole thing is antibacterial. And like, well, I'd rather do a rubber dam and use bonding agent from this. Dude, it's a Medicaid clinic, and this little kid doesn't want his inert plastic composite to have recurrent decay in 7 years. He'd love to have a toxic amalgam that will still be there when he's 40. So what dentists do is when they go treat the poor, they always build the same car they build in the suburbs, but get paid for a Ford Escort. Then they're confused why they lose money. My God, to go into a poor area and only do amalgams, extractions, removables, partials, flippers, the employees down there, a $10 an hour job is like a great job. In Scottsdale, they all want 20, 30 benefits, a 401k, and a bale of kale delivered to their house once a week. So the deal is, who is your market? Like McDonald's Does McDonald's treat the poor? I don't know. I eat at McDonald's. But McDonald's knows they're not Ruth's Chris. A dentist will go to McDonald's and say, well, I think we should have a chandelier and champagne and everyone wear it. They don't target a market. It's cost, it's price that makes it sell minus the profit you need equals your budget. If Medicare is only going to give me $1 for a filling and none of the dentists will take it because it's too low, because in Scottsdale that would be a composite, blah, blah, blah. And then you want to make 20%. So you get $1, you take 20%, 20 cents away, and you have an 80-cent budget. Oh my God, you make money hand over fist. But then you go to lunch with all your friends, and then Landon would say, well, I only use Ivoclar, and I use a laser on everything, and I use a CAD cam and a CBCT. So the bottom line is know your market. There's a time and a place to sell a Cadillac, but it's a much higher price. And the two industries that scare me the most is when someone else sets your price, which is all of healthcare. That's a huge no-no and would get you slaughtered on on Shark Tank, because you can't raise or lower your fee. The Medicaid, Medicare, Delta Dental, Blue Cross, they all set your fee. So you got to work backwards from a fee. And if you work backwards from a fee, now you have a budget. Dentists don't want budget. They'll take some course, decide they want a $100,000 CAD cam, a $100,000 Millennium laser, a $100,000 CBCT. Every time the earth goes around the sun, the staff says, doctor, can I get $1 raise? Because the earth just went around the sun and past Uranus. So give me another $1. And you just keep giving them dollars. Or, when you get a job at McDonald's, they say, look, you work at McDonald's. You're a cook at McDonald's. The pay range is from, $12 to $15. You'll never make more than $15. Dentists don't do that. They just keep giving their assistant $1 every time the earth goes around the sun. So where they were really profitable when labor is 20, now the guy's been practicing 20 years, his label's at 40, and he's calling up, why do I not make any money? Well, you just can't get a $1 raise because, what's it based on? Astrology? Is that where your economics comes from? Astrology? As opposed to capitalism. So being business smart, again, plow through the 30-day dental MBA. Supply equals demand. If there's no demand, don't go there. The demand in dentistry is always going to be where the poor people live in the big cities and in the rural towns where no one's at. And by the way, raising kids in the rural, that's pretty cool when you can buy your kid a mini bike and he can just go down a dirt road for 2 hours without getting arrested by the police. So, supply and demand. It's all simple. I don't think I've learned anything since Adam Smith wrote his book in 1776. It's not really going to change any more than algebra or geometry.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you, man. Any other questions?
Where do you see cryptocurrency and virtual blockchain taking dentistry and healthcare in the future?
That's a great question. Blockchain, you obviously you can just check it in reality by going home to your grandma and saying, have you ever seen anybody in your life buy a piece of bread with Bitcoin? And there's no evidence of that, yet you see all this money going there. So Bitcoin is obviously a store of value. It's not an exchange medium. It's too complicated. We already have an exchange medium. I can go take my Visa card and buy anything anywhere. That's not a problem. I don't see any people problem saying, well, the problem is I have money in the bank and there's bread on the shelf, but I don't know how to get the money from my bank to get the bread. It's solving a problem that doesn't exist. But the reason everybody's pouring their money in is the same reason Iran has this stock market deal. When you see the government print $1 trillion, they didn't collect it with taxes. They just blew it. You immediately saw oil go from 20 to 60 and all this stuff like that. And then you see the next guy come in and say, well, shit, $1 trillion. Let's move over. I'll do 1.8. People are running from money. So you saw them in Iran where they have no options. They just threw it in the stock market. They threw it in Bitcoin. They're just throwing it in something that's not something the government can't print. That's why real estate's always done so well. I've always owned my land and building because I don't care how many pieces of paper they print. They're just going to make my house be worth more because the number of houses didn't change. If you still only have one house and there was only $1 and now they print another dollar, now my house worth $2. That's why real estate went up 30% in the middle of a global pandemic when everything else contracted and 40 million people lost their job, but real estate went up 30%. It's not because there was a bigger demand, the value went up. It's just a lot of older people said, well, I'm going to put my money where the government can't print. So I always own my land and building as a hedge against inflation, because remember, inflation is the government. And if you want to know why the government's so dumb, is because those 14 million people, they were all born in your home. They all had your same mom and dad. It might be your sister. And you look at your finances. If you think the government's finances are insane, you ought to look at the finances of the people that put them in power. So, so when you're ragging on the government, it's because it's a lot easier to call the government on their shit than your whole family at a family reunion. You know what I mean? But people are not good with their money, and that trickles up all the way to the top. But Bitcoin is a store of value. It's not going to be used as a store of exchange, and nobody can show me the problem that it's solving. And then it violates the only two principles that I will not budge on. And that is, when you look at 5,000 years of history, there's two problems: transparency or being opaque. I mean, or do we know what you're doing? Oh, and they say, oh, well, Bitcoin, it's in the cloud internet somewhere. No, it's not. All the IP addresses are coming from North Korea, China, and Russia, and Iran. Okay, Bitcoin is those four countries who do not treat their own people very nice. And number one, and then I say, well, who owns it? I don't know. Well, that violates transparency. So you're putting your money into something and you don't even know who the hell owns it. I mean, that's just dumb. And number two is checks and balance, competition. We knew the kings and queens and autocrats, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. So they tried to divide up the king into a president, a Congress, and a Supreme Court. Competition. When I was a little kid, the car companies banned foreign imports. So on a Saturday, you walk down the street, every third house, the garage was trying to fix up this shitty Ford and Chrysler. They were just shit. And then when they finally were so shitty, the people demanded foreign imports, and Japan and Germany started sending in cars. At that time, GM sold half of all the cars in America. Now it's down to 30%. And the cars at Ford and GM are 3 times better. Germany is the best country at it. Germany, the reason they are the rock star of Europe is because their government, would never call you a monopoly. They don't have problems like that. But the minute they see that you're not in a big competition and a big war, and you got that big NFL game on Sunday, and half the people think this team's going to win and the other half, they're going to make sure you have competition. So if you get so big where they don't see you training for a big fight, a big match, they break you up. As long as everybody's training for a competition match, and all the terms are transparent, so everybody in the stadium knows what the game is. They know how it's played. A football game is perfect. It's 2 teams. I know all the rules. It's all transparent. It's all above board, and that's what makes it Germany. But when you go to China, their yuan will never be the international reserve currency because it's a closed system. No one even knows what the Communist Party is doing. Same with Putin or Iran or any of these countries. They want transparency. So whenever you're looking at a deal and it's like Bitcoin and you can't even tell me who owns it, you can't even tell me where it's located at, even though all the computer scientists say it's only coming from 4 places, China, Russia, and all that kind of stuff. And then you can't explain why 1,000 digital currencies have gone under. And that doesn't change your mind. For me, when I see a deal, I can immediately say, well, he's not being transparent and he doesn't want any competition. And the game's over. Next game. Not to mention that businesses, everybody's throwing a pitch at you that you can hit. So why the hell would you swing at something if you don't even know who's throwing it? And it's some non-competitive guy from behind a tree. I mean, I want transparency. I want competition. And that's why I'm addicted to the NFL. I have wasted more time watching NFL football. I would be embarrassed to tell you what percent of my life was completely wasted watching the NFL. It's so ridiculous and dumb and tribal, but I admit I love it. But is it transparent or opaque? Is it competition or anti-competitive? And that should answer all your questions at a fundamental level. So now that you know there's no root to that tree, I don't want to hear you talking about all the branches and leaves and all this foo-foo stuff. That tree doesn't have a root to stand on, and it'll come tumbling down.
It's well put. I appreciate that. I appreciate you kind of putting it fundamentally.
But in saying that,
Yeah.
I was honest that I waste all this time in the NFL. Okay. I have dentist friends who I love and adore who love to go into Vegas and gamble the whole weekend, and they'll go drop 10, 20. I got a friend that loses about 40,000 every time he goes to Vegas. Well, he knows what he's doing. He makes the money. He's budgeted. I know Monday nights I could do something smarter than watch Monday Night Football. So as long as you know, if you might enjoy the game, it might be fun. It's a gambling thing. If you know it's a game and it's bingo and it's a casino and you enjoy it, go do it. But if you actually think it's an investment and it has merits and it means something and it's going to change the world, then you can't explain the violations to transparency and competition.
Understandable. So
what is
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Landon.
I had another question for you real quickly. If you still have the time, which we appreciate.
Absolutely.
I was amazed when I reached out to you how automated and how well you delegate to members of your team. Can you kind of explain to me how you first realized you need to start delegating and freeing up your time a little bit and what that process looks like?
Well, first of all my heroes are dead. And they were all flawed people. I mean, right now, the new thing is to point out that Walt Disney was this and Henry Ford was that. And even the Bible says, if you haven't let the person who hasn't sinned throw the first stone. All humans are flawed, myself included, and they're all dead. I mean, Pythagoras died 2,500 years ago, and he was my first huge hero. And the bottom line is that you're going to die. So you start a dental office, and you have to realize that you were born and you're going to die. And so you have to know how this process works. And the best way, what the founding father of a company has to do is build a founding team. Well, I got about 10 people that have been with me for 2 decades. They don't want, I'm not going to micromanage. I mean, if you've been on my team for 2 years, let's say I'm football, I play offense and you play defense. Well, I'm not going to go play your defense for you and pull you out of the game, and your defense, it's a totally different position. And it's so easy because at first it was hard. You're wearing all the hats. You're trying to attract and retain team members, and the people who never go anywhere. It's easiest to measure in their staff turnover. If you keep changing out staff every 2 to 3 years, no one ever knows what the hell is going on. But until you start to develop people who are lifers, and then they only hire people that are like them, then the founding father can die, and the people who have been there 20 years run it another 10, 20 years, and it just goes on. In fact, Japan, the oldest company in Japan is actually Nintendo, which started out as playing cards in the 1800s. They've been in games for over a century. So the biggest red flag, like let's say I graduated dental school and I really wanted to go back to this town where you're born and raised, and that's where you want to live, and there were 2 jobs available. And here's how dentists think. They'll call me back up and say, well, one will pay me 30%, but I got to pay out my lab bill. The other one will pay me 25%, but they'll pay the lab bill. Which one should I take? Dude, if I could answer that, then Match.com could marry 30 million people tonight. They would just say, yeah, you're going to marry Dustin Barr. You're a perfect match. Go get married. That ain't how it works. What if one dentist, nobody would work there over 3 years, and he's on his 3rd wife? And the other one, he's got, like my new hygienist, She's been there 14 years. I mean, imagine if every time you went home to see your mom, every time she had a different husband. And then every time you saw your sister, she had a different husband. I mean, you need stability. And that is why that is the only reason all the poor countries are poor and all the rich countries are rich. It comes down to only one thing: stability. No one's going to move to your country when it has a coup d'etat every 6 months. No one's going to move to your country when the dictator will steal your land and bacon and car and they don't. So it's just who's the least stable is going to always be poor, and who's more stable will always attract the rich. Because if I've got $1 and a gold coin and an idea, I'm not going to go to some crazy ass place that no one has any idea what's going to happen next if I've got something more stable. Well, stability is the same in your business. If every time I come in every 6 months to get my cleaning, you got a different hygienist, DSO, every one of them, I start to lose faith. I go to a DSO and you're the dentist and you say I have 3 cavities. So I schedule to come back and now you're not there and Andrew tells me I have 4. So then I go get a second opinion and Kern tells me I have 2. It's like, you guys are crazy. But if you just sort of stuck to, we told them 4, it's always going to be 4. Satisfaction equals what I expected or what I'm perceiving minus what I expected. And when I was a little kid, they only had 3 stations and there's only one show for me. It was Batman. I got out of school at 3:30 and at 4 o'clock was Batman on the same Bat station, on the same Bat channel, on the same Bat time, KAKE channel 10. Everybody knew that Batman was at 4 o'clock on Channel 10. And what the DSOs do, and as all this turnover, and you sell the invisible. Now, if I went and stayed at a hotel, when I go in there, they'll put a paper slip around the toilet seat. What does that mean? I mean, what am I supposed to do? Culture the toilet seat to see if you cleaned it? It's the maid selling the invisible. I clean the toilet, and that's my way of showing you. You get a glass, it's got a cup on it. It's a clean glass. When you get a room service, they put a little piece of straw left on there. Just so it's a new straw. You're always selling invisible. When I go buy an iPhone, I know what it is. When I buy a bottled water, I know what it is. When you tell me I have 4 cavities, that's not, I'm not transparent. I'm not aware of this. So I'm looking around and your assistant's been there for 5 years and your hygienist's been there 5 years and my mama referred me to you and you're a hallmark, you're stable. And once they see stability in your personal life, your family life, your community life, and they just say, he's a good guy. And what good guy means is no entropy. You want to hire people that every time you see them, the same person shows up. A lot of dentists hire these moody people. They're like lovely on one day and you just want to marry her. The next day, she's a witch that flew in to work on a broom and they're up and down and they're moody and they're unstable and they destroy the whole team. You want an entire team, an entire brand, an entire image that says, we're stable. You come here, you'll find the same Bat doctor from the same Bat station at the same Bat channel. You can always trust us because what you expect us to be will always be that way. You're not going to come in here and one day, every day something's different. You want long-term stability.
Howard, I have to ask. So you're one of the moguls in dentistry. You started Dental Town, which is the most used dental website in the world, probably. You have a dental magazine. You have one of the most listened to podcasts in dentistry of all time, and you still talk to students like us. Why do you do what you do? Why do you connect with, or why do you interview some of the high well-known people in dentistry, like Hornbrook and Christensen, and then you also go and interview dental students who are in need and stuff like that? Why do you do that?
For totally selfish reasons. I'm going to die, and I got 6 grandkids, and when Taylor and Donnell and Gunner and Mason and when they need a dentist, when they break their tooth, it's going to be one of you guys. I mean, we're all in this together. No one's getting off the rock. No one can raise their own children till death and their grandchildren till death. And it's a group effort. And if my children's children are going to have a great life, it's going to be because of the tribe. And the tribe is 8 billion people. There's only one species, and it has like less diversity. I mean, the genetic diversity of Homo sapien is a fraction of almost every other species. You know, dogs, cats, elephants, whatever. We're one species. It's a very tight breed, and all of my children's children and your children's children, their whole future is going to depend on how well we all work together as one team. So I think that my life's value would have no value if whatever I learned wasn't transferable to the replacements. And, you know, when I'm getting ready to leave dentistry and we throw you the ball and you catch it and you're about to enter, I mean, God, I want you to be a better team than my team, and we all win. So it's that spirit. It's like we're all in this together, and I don't care what Elon Musk's talking about. Elon Musk is a classic example where you know, because we use Celsius and Fahrenheit, nobody realizes that the cold side of the moon and the Mars, you know, the universe is 2.7 Kelvin. So the coldest night that was ever recorded on Antarctica was like 180 degrees Kelvin. So I know you think you're all going to move to Mars, but I'm asking myself, why didn't you move to Antarctica first? I mean, that'd be like Hawaii compared to Mars. And if you want to go to Venus, well, why don't you live at the bottom of the ocean? See, the ocean is 70% of the Earth surface. It's 2.5 miles deep, and you don't want to live under that pressure, and you don't want to live in Antarctica. But since you can't see apples to apples, and Elon says, well, we're going to Mars, and he's trading at 1,500 times earnings while he's smoking pot on the Joe Rogan show, he's just making you feel good, and you love him, and you want to be a part of that, and you're like, oh, I'm going to buy Bitcoin and Tesla, and hell yeah. And, you know, fine. I would rather just watch the Cardinals. You know, it's a better game than that. Yeah, and maybe when I'm 80 years old, maybe I'll live to be 80 and I'll have Alzheimer's, and you'll be my dentist. I won't even remember you from tonight. And I want you to be a good, profitable dentist, especially healthcare. I don't want doctors starving to death and doing unnecessary operations. I think all my grandchildren would be better served if all their doctors were wealthy enough where they didn't care if you needed a filling or a crown. They just want to do the right thing. And I don't want a bunch of starving vultures treating my grandchildren that have to do things they don't want to do for money, which is a form of economic violence on someone. So, yeah, I wish this dental profession well.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. You know, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you and talk to you. And, you know, it really means a lot to all of us here at Midwestern. It's huge.
Well, it was an honor to come on your show. Best of luck, and give Brad Gettleman all the shit you can give him on behalf of me. But love Brad. Give him a shout out. You guys are so lucky to have Brad. He's just the best.
We're excited. Thank you so much, Howard.
Thank you.
Really
all right.
Yeah,
thanks for the
so
invite.
much.
Awesome.